as last part, we will talk about how the business dimensional lifecycle of a data warehouse can look like. Because in the beginning, we talked about the definition of business intelligence, we talked about Inman, and we talked about Kimball. The business dimensional lifecycle is more the Kimball approach. So we're talking about between these two approaches. So I will overtake at the moment, and Victor will then go on after we finished the slideshow. So, as a repetition, what was COT? What are the roots of COT? Any ideas? Can you give me an example? What are the roots of COT without looking into the materials? Was beinhalteten nochmal die Regeln von COT? Ohne Info in die Dokumente zu gucken. So what are the roots of COT? Any idea? Can anyone name one rule of COT? We discussed them. So, information rule. Okay. Marvin, can you explain it? But what does it mean from your side, information rule? Okay, so what's okay? There is no rule called information rule in COT. That's why I wanted to know what you are talking about. I think you're talking a little bit into the rule 6, which is called generic dimensionality, which means that the dimensions should be equivalent to each other in thinking about the storage and thinking about how the operational capabilities are designed. I think it's like more that role. So if you're going back, definitely we have 12 rules, and you should be able to name at least 2, 3 of them without any problems. We talked about multidimensionality. We talked about that we have views there in it. We talked about, we can support transparency. And the user should not know what is the source. The tool should know it, but not the user. The user should use the information. That I can use it. That I can use it in any kind of or any form or so. And he should not think about, where is it stored physically? You see, we had a lot of different stuff, and I think what you're describing, Marvin, is more going into that I have the information in equivalent structure and so on. but there is no storing or so. You have like update access, integrity, security. Be the same. Okay, so we have 12 rules of code. And today we should go on and now think about, okay, what is could be not the other approach. And I told you that is FASMI. But before we are coming to that, we had one further big topic. It was OLTP versus OLAP. What is OLTP data? Can you give me an example for an OLTP data? Wie sehen OLTP-Daten aus? Und die Eigenschaften beschreiben und dir ein Beispiel geben. The difference between OLTP and OLAP data is, for example, the time horizon, like 30 to 90 days for OLTP, 5 to 10 years for OLAP data. OLAP data is more aggregated. It's often pre-processed, because I don't need detailed data. I don't. It's not interesting for me to know which person sold that product or something like that. So it's the granularity is different. For example, in OLTP, I have more frequent updates, in OLAP not, and so on. So please have that in mind and have examples to that. Because in OLAP, I often use more complex queries instead of easy queries. For example, I want to know if I change the price or the product there, what influence has this on another product, or what influence has this on other, for example, sales location, like countries and so on. That is what I'm doing in OLAP versus OLTP. I want to optimize, I want to see the current, for example, sales revenues in that store. Okay, FASMI as an alternative to COTS rules. Instead of 12 rules, I have 5 rules. That is fast, analyzes, shared, multidimensional, and information. So fast, it means everything what I'm doing should not require more than 20 seconds. So there are a few seconds or more complex queries should not be done in more than 20 seconds. Analyzes, I should be able to do that, to create the queries and all that stuff without knowing any kind or not without using any kind of programming languages. Shared. That is a big problem in OLAP systems oftentimes, so I have to think about, because normally I have only read access. It must have an access control, definitely, and it must be able to support multi-user. It must support multidimensionality, so like cubes and so on. And information, the scalability should be in that way how the addressed persons wants it. If, for example, monthly data is enough, then that is the lowest granularity in it. That is what the rules of FASMI are demanding. So hopefully you can see this is more easy to do. If you're looking, for example, for your written exam, you should definitely able to explain FASME, explain the roots of COT, and, for example, name something and explain something and give them with examples. That is what you have to be able with exams. So that were the two different approaches or rule sets. Any questions to that? Gibt es irgendwelche Fragen zu dem Abschnitt? Okay, no question. Then we will go on with reports. So if you're talking about something and if you want to make decisions, what we are needing is we're needing a decision base. And for that, we're needing KPIs. What could be KPIs? If we want to measure anything, what we are needing, what is it? What is this? We need a performance measurement system. And what is it? It's a system that supports manager and tracking the implementation of business strategies. I have to define our strategic goals and objectives. This is what I have to do. Also, what I have to do is to here, 1 second, I want to show it with the laser pointer here, to define how I want to model it, what kind of approaches I use, what principle I'm following, and so on. It could be, for example, that I'm following the DMARC principles. Like, first I have to define it, then I measure it, I analyze it, then I want to give improvements to it, and then check it again. So that could be like a closed loop. And also what you can see here is you need some focus or some key factors, some indicators which are important for you, which are balancing the needs of your different stakeholder groups. Because you cannot only optimize or taking KPIs which are only supporting one stakeholder group. So it's not fitting. Because you have to support more. Because otherwise, these stakeholder groups, if they are not important, then okay. But then for that, you have to prioritize your stakeholder groups. What are KPIs? Key performance indicators. You have to define them. You have to define them. So not only tell it's that is a formula. Also, you have to explain what are the levels. So the understanding. So explaining to me, for example, the matrix of it. What are KPIs representing? They are representing the strategic objectives and telling me, for example, okay, what is it? Like sales revenues. 1 second. Why I'm losing the internet? Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. But
there are no interruption at all. Everything goes fine.
Okay, then the WLAN was working directly because now I'm not anymore connected to the LAN, only to the WLAN. That's why I'm seeing it. Okay, so you definitely have to know about the KPIs. So what are your targets? What are the ranges, timeframes to give it a matrix and so on. Some KPIs, which could it be, is like service performance, customer performance. If you have a sales plan or sales forecast, so like a forecast how many revenues you are doing, how many products you're selling, and so on, all that can be a KPI. What is really important is that you are not getting the wrong kind of measurements. Because if you want to find it, if, for example, if somebody's telling you you have to count that or that, please do it in the correct way. For example, if you measure, for example, the number of nails made, you definitely will not count them. Normally, what you're doing is you measure them in kilogram of nails, or something like that, because otherwise it's too hard. But if you're making the weights of, if you're, for example, getting the weight of nails, so then definitely it should be everything of the correct size. You should not have, as shown here, 3 big nails. That's not working. Then you don't have the correct stuff. So have that in your mind that when you are measuring, you must define it before correctly so that nobody can do it in a wrong way. Now we are coming to the report. What is a report for us? For us, a report is like a tool for communication. It often defines what kind of information is in it, like a sales report. Okay, then I know, okay, it will be about sales numbers. Something like that. It's providing us any kind of results. It's hopefully explain us what is the current status of our company in this topic, and hopefully explain also to us for example, on what level we are, and hopefully motivate us to do something better. For example, you see downstairs a possible sales report was using Pentaho, and you see what they are telling you. You see they have attributes, and it's like some information which are providing context. So I know, okay, that is a Ferrari, and that's a Ferrari Spider in red, and so on. I see how many are sold on all markets. I see what is on measurements, how many sales I have, and so on and so on. And also have here a highlighting, because what I also need is like a metric, a quantitative measurement, and then something like a grid or table to organize it. And like some filters here, with, for example, the highlighting to show me what are the differences, what are good numbers, what are bad numbers. For example, here they sold less cars. That's this market in this quarter 2004. So I also have to know something like that. What kind of reports I can have, like a standard report answering a question, which is, for example, coming out yearly, monthly, and so on. But also what I can have is real-time information like ad hoc reporting, which is coming out if something occurs. That describe, for example, how something's changed and so on. So it shows the current information on the company in this topic. Or what I also can use is, instead of an ad hoc report or standard reports, which are often predefined, I can use an OLAP report, so where I can change the focus depending on what kind of use I have to support for my users. see there are further stuff like dashboard reports where I have, for example, showing only one single indicator or everything on one page. And for example, on this page, I show you 10 to 20 KPIs in maximum. Normally, you will not see more than 10 KPIs on a page. Because I have to understand it, and if it's a page which is a dashboard which is updated regularly, like each minute, each 20 seconds, and so on, then it's really important that I don't have an information overflow. I can put there some filters or some other stuff in, and so on. See further one, this is a so-called balanced scorecard type report, where you have often an integrated view, where you try to find to link company statuses to various aspects such as financial stuff, the financial report or customer report or something like that, so that you highlight something. Or you can have something like a management report, which is based on one topic, for example, one service level agreement, which is telling us, okay, is it fulfilled or not fulfilled, or is it, for example, on a KPI, only the revenues of that, and so on. Oftentimes you have different target groups, and due to that, you have different forms of what are the people thinking to get, or what are they expecting to get. And you can see that still a lot of reports are shared via email. So oftentimes it's a PDF format or something like that. How the people are sharing the information. But you see, also there are some spreadsheets, but also the paper documents are still used. And definitely now with the pandemic and all the further more digital processes which are supported, that will go down or should go down. So that is like what Ilka stated out when he prepared that slide. Surprisingly, paper documents are still used or often used. What we will also see is that we will have more and more digital prepared reports. But we have put it in. It's coming from a course which was created from SAP for all the different universities and so on. And here they're sharing crystal reports, and why they are highlighting that. Because if you're looking into the history, how everything has evolved and how the development was going on in SAP and so on, you will see that crystal reports was a long time the standard tool people have used. Because crystal reports was able to make a really nicely shown report versus what I had on that time, only with SAP. Because here I have like German called Balkendiagramme, Säulendiagramme, I have the cake diagrams, and so on and so on. All these different kind of diagrams which are supported, and the pixel, the byte is really the pixel I'm using. Also, it's really correct, or it's really easy, and so on. Which is oftentimes was a big problem for any kind of other software, that they are not able to create these kind of information. So what is a dashboard? It's provide a convenient overview of pre-selected key performance indicators. So they're pre-selected. Sometimes I can put also on that some filters, and I can change something and so on, make it more interactive, but it's predefined. It's mostly optimized to support a resolution like a tablet or here like a monitor or something like that, because you cannot optimize it for everything. So every time, for example, on the monitor, I can put more buttons on it. I can put more interactive functionality on it versus which I can put on something which I can use on a cell phone. It's not working, or it's a small tablet. Because buttons must be on a special size, otherwise it's not really working. Sometimes it's really hard. Here you see some examples. Victor has put it together. What you should have in mind if you design, for example, a dashboard is you should find out, make it like how you want to communicate, and it should have the highest priority, because you should have every time in your mind what are my communication channels, and I should prioritize them, because I cannot optimize it for everything. Current dashboards used and so on should support like web-based, because a lot of different software or different devices are supporting any kind of browsers. So if I only have that as a requirement, I can support a lot of different kind of devices. It should start, for example, with a big picture and then allow me to get more detail, so drill to the detail and so on. So what I should get from a dashboard directly, I should get directly, for example, an idea about it. Oftentimes, that's why people, for example, trying to use like some animation or something like here. In German, it's called Ampel, flashlight, red light, or something like that. So that you see, oh, red is a problem, yellow, it's okay, it's still working, but I should look into it, and green, everything is okay. I don't have to look into it. So using, for example, oftentimes some kind of visual representation of the status, like flashlight to show the status of that process or something like that, or of that KPI. Is it in the range I, for example, forecasted, or is it not? It should allow, for example, also to customize the keys, to find out or to prioritize them. I have, for example, also to reduce information which I don't need. Here, support also prompt action and so on. So let me change something and so on. Be proactive. Should allow me to send, for example, something with an email, and add, for example, a PDF to it with the results of my analysis, so that I can support that to somebody else. That were the reports. So it was only like show a small outlook into what kind of reports are available, how I can organize them, what I should think about them when I organize them, when I create them. So if there are no questions, then I will go on with the last part of this lecture, and that is the business dimensional life cycle. The idea is now what kind of steps or what kind of phases I have to do to create, to introduce, or to get a data warehouse. And Kimball have defined that in this way. He designed the data warehouse toolkit. So I have several phases. Some are parallel and some are not parallel. Like here, I starting with the project planning. I have to define the requirements to get the business understanding. Then I can start with the technical architecture to create them. I can here make the mapping of information and data understanding so that I really understand the data, what is the meaning. I can make them synonym and all that stuff. I can model them, and later I can implement them. So I can implement not the data here. Here I can implement the data warehouse completely with the data model and then the data loading and all that stuff. Then I have to test it. Everything is okay. So then I have, for example, to support end users with a training so that they are able to handle the data, to perform data tasks and so on. And hopefully, if everything is going right, then I can go live and I can use it active. Sometimes I have to change something, so for that I need definitely change management and so on. And sometimes later I have to think also about it when I will have to get the system out of my, for example, out of my company. So in German it would be called like Ablösung. Ablösung der Systeme wird auch untersucht. So, and now a little bit in detail so that you can also make a repetition for yourself at home and so on. So that's the same, but also in other colors. You see here now we're focusing on what kind of lessons you have, like more management-oriented lessons or tasks, and more technical-oriented tasks. And if we're starting, so that is what we are doing. In the first step, we have to define the project, to define the scope of the project, creating a project plan, and to find out who is involved. If we are looking back into what we have here and so on, that means, for example, find out which kind of stakeholder groups are involved into the project or influenced by it, who I should put into it. So that I have to find out, and then creating the plan. Next, in the business requirement definition, okay, I have to define what are the requirements, functional and non-functional. What are my KPIs? How the terminology is looking like? Are there some similarities which I have to get out of the data? Is there something? So are they used some words as synonyms and so on? If I have done that, then I'm creating the architecture, creating everything what I need in the background, so front end and back end stuff and so on, and creating everything also around the metadata. If I have done that, then hopefully I can evaluate what kind of products I need, what products are delivering, what kind of benefits I'm getting, and then I can choose a product like that and create the installation process and hopefully find out what kind of features I need. Then Dimensional modeling, yes, I have to define what I have in it, how the semantic and the logic and the physical is looking out. Do I need a lot of fact tables or don't I need them? Is there something special, like something which is non-additive or semi-additive? I told you everything that I want to put into the cube should be additive, like summation or maximum points and so on, or minimum points, something like that. So that is really important. And any kind of specialties I need. The physical design then are looking, for example, how I will get the data in, how we store it and optimize it. For example, sometimes it's supporting if I have row-based versus column-based storing. I have to find that out. Naming standards. So for example, sometimes you have like naming tables, so everything should start with that with B or 0 or Z. Example 0 is, for example, in SAP BW, it's called business content. It's predefined. So everything, if you're using, for example, any kind of object and it started with a 0, you know it's coming from the business content. Every time if you're starting, it's starting with a Z. It's also something predefined. And so that definitely you have to think about it. You have to think about where I can store everything. Is there enough room about it? Then, due to how I divide the data, how I store them, how I can use indexing to change or to support a fast approach, or do I can, for example, use partitioning? Tell the people, okay, how we can divide something. And all that stuff is really important. If you have done everything like that, then the most underestimated process has to be done, the ETL process. So I have to look into what kind of data quality I have, what kind of transformation are needed. I have to create the initial population load, which is really important. So the initial load from all the systems on which everything is working. And I also have to know what kind of regular loading, for example, I have, or is it only incremental loading? End-user application specification and development. What does mean by that? Okay, I have to define as a standard report. Is there anything special? Do I need it? Do I need a visualization, for example, of geodata, like a map or something like that? How I should support, like what kind of channels, communication channels I should support. That is here important. Then hopefully I can use it. So I need, for example, some user support to install it or something, doing something. I need, for example, training measure plan. So how I can train my people and all that stuff. I need, for example, for my KPIs, a metric. So to analyze, for example, how is it working and so on. And then, as I told you, you only not have here like development and so on. In your face, you have also to think about management, the growth of your software, and which was out in the last slide, the replacement. One have to think about replacement. That oftentimes is this time frame like, okay, then the security issues are going too high because so the system is not maintaining anymore. So I know after that year, after that month, I have to optimize it by myself. Otherwise, I have a problem. by security issues and so on. So replacement is also really, really important to know. Here you have some ideas about what kind of approaches, what kind of other stuff I can use in that. Like, for example, to find out the business requirement definition, I can make like interviews, I can make questionnaires, but I also can make an observation. Also, that is possible. When I'm modeling something, I can use like the standard star schema from SAP, which is really easy, but I can also use something else. For example, if I have a factless fact table problem, I can build that up. Or I can use, if I have several fact tables and they have the dimension tables, I can create out of that the so-called galaxy scheme. Also, that is possible. Okay, I hope that you now get it a little bit more that what was the approach of Kimball. And then I think we are finished. And coming to the slide that if you have any questions. So that was the fourth slideshow, which we have not finished last week. Are there any questions? Gibt es irgendwelche Fragen zum vierten Foliensatz? Ich sehe nichts tippen, so I don't see anybody typing. So thanks a lot. And Victor, will you overtake with your part?
Yeah, thank you a lot for your time. So now on that, I'll just overtake the lecture. I think you already uploaded the slides for today, or?
No, I've uploaded nothing because I don't was not knowing if
No, I mean for your lecture. I uploaded
Yes,
for
it
my
was
lecture.
uploaded last week. It's
Yeah. Okay. Just give me a second. I'll take the presenter and change the slides. Before I will proceed, I have a question to you, for sure, regarding the exercises, or more or less announcement. If you are struggling with the infrastructure that we are offering to you to complete the exercises, just drop me an email. And also information for you if the login to pgadmin is not working unless you will write me an email, and I will try to fix it. Actually, I already fixed it. I need to deploy a newer version of the backend, and due to upcoming deployment, it could be that the services are not available for some time, I think, for a couple of minutes. So if you will face some problems with the infrastructure, don't worry, it's me playing around with the infrastructure. But if you're struggling with the infrastructure for a longer time, then just let me know. It should not happen. It should not actually take place, just like for your information. And hope you are proceeding with the exercises. And in case you have some questions, you can also ask them. Of course, you will not, but still. So I will go to the topic of today's lecture. So today we are going to speak about the business intelligence, and we are going to speak about some open source tools, ETL, and visualization tools. I assume that we won't finish all the slides or all the topics today because they are a bit complicated. I mean, there are really a lot to cover, but still the core ones we'll try to cover, and I will proceed next week, I think, if I am not done. Yeah, so as I told you, we're going to speak about the open source BI, then about ETL tools of BI, and of course about the ETL process, and like some interesting topics are going to be covered, such as slowly changing dimensions. And if we have time, we're also going to speak about the visualization tools of BI. But I think we will not manage it. But still, we have the information. And we have, I think, if I'm not wrong, we have two, just a second. Just let me check. Yeah, we have an exercise on visualization this week and the next week. So we won't cover the visualization, but still it's important before we will go to the visualization, we have to speak about the ETL. So first of all, let's get back to the open source BI. And Andreas already spoke about the reporting. And let's look at what reporting is actually providing you with. It first of all provides you with the following value on the left side of the slide. So because the business wants the following, the information that is relevant for the business must be up to date. It have to be clear and unambiguous. It means it have to be, if you have a particular fact, this fact have to be correct one. It's nice if the data is analyzed, and what is also important, it have to be used for decision making. So what means decision making? It's like implicitly you have a lot of stuff behind it, such as the trustfulness, the completeness of the data, and so on and so forth. Then you have an reporting solution that offers some, or that covers some of the topics or some of the values that are required by the business. For instance, it facilitates the good understanding and multiple channel distributions. What means multiple channels in this case? Second. You know, I just moved the slides on my key on my monitor to the different place so I can see the slides. So, reporting solution offer good understanding and multiple channel distribution. Good understanding is clear. Yeah, you did it. It's perfect. What means multiple channels? It's not obligatory that you are going to use some kind of advanced reporting informant dashboard. It also could be that you will distribute the analytical artifacts via the emails, for instance. Like I mentioned to you, generated PDF files or generated Excel files that are sent via emails, for instance. I saw such cases. They're existing. Why? Because you always have an email infrastructure, and you can use it, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to yet another tool. But it's not. But when you're doing it, you have different problems. For instance, imagine that you are sending emails that are like 1 or 2 megabyte every day, and in 1 year you will have no place on your inside your email box. Easy access to the information. It means simplified information, easy to use, offer sophisticated analysis tools. It's also like we spoke about the KPIs, and the one should interpret the KPIs. Sometimes they're really complex. So maybe it's also a good idea to split the KPIs in a way that the people who are for whom you design the report will really understand those KPIs in a clear way. So this is like reducing the complexity of the communication, and which leads to the improved decision making. Usually you have I will call it a classical plan or classical execution strategy, which is really straightforward. It's called plan, do, check, act. So it's like self-explanatory, and what we are doing actually with the reporting or with the let's call it PI solutions, we are like helping during this check phase. Of course, I mean, because we are just trying to communicate or trying to investigate in details the current situation of the business. We're not speaking for now about any kind of predictions or some alerts to or motivations to calls for actions or whatever. So there is also a possibility to use BI, for instance, for planning. It's possible. There are even the methodologies for that. And for instance, one of the methodology called driver-based planning, which must be integrated with the BI solution, and trigger-based means, or driver-based, trigger-based means you have a plan and you have a lot of facilities integrated, and you change some core points, and all your planning is changing. And changing something means like changing something inside the BI solution. Okay, but we're now focusing on the check, and keep in mind that we are helping this from this classical approach. We're helping this particular stage of checking. Why is open source? Open source doesn't mean free, and as you know it by now, we are doing a master studies, so it means open source and not free. So it means that you are not paying for licenses, but still you may pay for something else: infrastructure, support, hire proper people to manage it, or pay your own employees, for instance, to install, run, support, and maintain the solution that you are deployed. But why it's a good idea to start with an open source solution when a particular company has no BI? First of all, you have a clear scope. You understand the what you really need. Why? Because sometimes you need to. It's not like you click something and you get the price list for the BI solution. Sometimes it's also not possible, because the BI solution is a combination of tools and workforces, like the people who are doing it. That's why sometimes it's not possible to get a direct bill or direct offer, which is really frightening for small and medium enterprises, because if you will have a bill that you cannot pay and you really are not generating any revenue based on what you did or what you invested, it's a disaster. From this perspective, it's a good idea to start with with the open source solution, but in this case, you also have a problem. You know the online shop called Brille24. So they're selling retail of the glasses. They're producing and selling the glasses. They hold once a lecture where they are partners of our department, and they hold once a lecture and they explain their strategy doing the BI. I put them into small and medium enterprises for the moment. And I think, if I'm not wrong, they took Pentaho and took another solution as well, and due to the fact that they could develop the software, and due to the fact that they had a really special needs in terms of BI, they almost re-implemented the BI solution completely. So that's why in their case it cost them a lot, and maybe starting from the beginning and like dropping all the open source and just not going with the vendor-based solution could be a nice strategy for them, but you never know when you start. Why they had this problem? Because they are not starting the case. Just imagine you have glasses and they could have endless number of endless number of different combinations that you can sell, because they produce after you order. That's why you can potentially have endless number of combinations. Yeah, glasses, they sound simple, but we have different vendors and different types of materials and different glasses and so on and so forth. That's why they were like had to do that. Just an example for you to think about. But still, it's a good idea to start with the open source if you are new on the market, so you can like deploy a software, look how it runs, look how typical workflows are organized in order to understand whether you can like benefit from such kind of software or not. Yeah. So I already spoke about it, and just like to give you a sense of I will just ignore all the numbers for the moment because it's really outdated. Look at the graphs. So you have some sort of go live, yeah? And look at the bottom here, when you have an open source, you have not that much investments at the very beginning before you go live. Because, but still, go live could be somewhere here in comparison to proprietary. And now here, the line is simply here. It's just drawn. So it means at the very beginning you invest not that much, but with the time you still will be investing a lot. I mean, not a lot, but still you'll be investing some money, less than in comparison to proprietary BI, but you won't be as the company, you won't have all the features. And maybe migrating somewhere at this point could be too late. And with proprietary BI, you see the cost, it's never starts from the zero, never ever. So you firstly have to like spend some money, and then it goes, and somewhere after you go live, you start to get some return on investments. And if you like think about those numbers, they could be really huge. And one could say, okay, it's not only huge numbers, the time is also, it could be 1 year, for instance. So 1 or 2 years, you need to see the real feedback of deployed BI solution. And don't forget that you need also to change the processes, you need to change the mindset of the people, and so on and so forth. So it's to some extent a philosophical question, not only the question of the budget. But still, now you know how to differentiate between them. And if you have a proprietary BI, which is not definitely bad, what benefits you get? For instance, we spoke about the trends for the last years, for such as, I don't know, artificial intelligence embedded into BI, integration with the big data facilities such as Hadoop. You will see them as well in open source solutions, but you have to, I will show with the Tahoe, they're sort of like, they're not directly integrated. You have to overtake the integration part, which is sometimes really a disaster. And sometimes you don't have a BI, open source BIs, which is like too expected and don't have up-to-date features, but sometimes you really don't need them. So you will firstly need real artificial intelligence, maybe in a couple of years when you start with the analysis. Some examples. I gathered for you some examples. I always like to give a couple of examples so you have an overview, and so you can pick the one you like, and it's good that you like at least heard the name at least once. There are a couple of open source vendors, so like Bird, Novaga, Jasper Software, and Pendragon. So some of them are really old and are not used today, or some part of them are used today, such as they were like introduced 10 years ago in a particular company, and the company keeps using them, and they are quite happy with the solution. The Bird. So the Bird is actually a Eclipse-based tool. So it's like Java-based tool that is like, if you're familiar with Eclipse, it will be like an Eclipse. So they have different tools inside them. So for instance, what I mean by the different tools, they have report designer and report engine. So what means report designer? So you can sort of design the report in the form of XML report design. So you can export it to the report engine, and then the report engine can generate based on those XML files a report for you. So just a second. Yeah, it's still, yeah. You see the latest release happened to be a long time ago, so 2080, which says that there were not big releases since then, only bug fixes, and which is more or less nowadays, if you think about the tool, it's a bit heavy, it's a desktop, so you generate the reports not for the web. They have a web availability, I think, but it's not that used, and it's error prone, and it could be really heavy and hard to maintain. That's why people like using something different, for instance, to generate reportings. To generate report, and you will see a tool like Metabase. There is a Dash, there is an Apache Superset. So there are tools that are a bit better than the Bird, and they're like really web-based, and we are like all interconnected, and we are like to use web-based tools. There is Novaga, which is used to be known as Spargo BI. Why it's important to know? Because one of the arguments for using an open source, you get and for sort of support for free, or the community that supports it. It's really nice, and sometimes when you search for Novaga, you will find a documentation from Spargo BI, which is sort of compatible. They changed the name once, I think 3 years ago. It's available for free. It got a repository on GitHub, which means it's a bit more advanced than Bird. So most of you are familiar with the GitHub in one or another way. So it's AGPL. So results must be also, if you do something, they also have to be published under AGPL. I won't get deeper into the licensing, but it's also a good point to check before you will go with the open source with an open source solution, any kind. What kind of license can you use internally? Can you use it like to sell something or whatever? It's claimed to have a full usability for end user. And there is a community edition available. So classically, you have a community edition and enterprise edition. If you visited the exercises last week, one of the examples you already saw that runs this model, it's DB Viva. You have a community edition that we're using, and we have enterprise edition that get way more features. But to be honest, I think I once with DB Viewer run into the feature that is not existing there. For instance, using no SQL databases like key-value based NoSQL databases such as Redis. They don't have a connector for Redis in the community edition, but with Redis, it's simply you always have a Docker container that will fire up the GUI to edit the Redis database. So such examples or such features are not available in community edition, but still they have really huge amount of features that you can use out of the box. Then, so they have a modules. What is important to know about the models? Most of the software, I think that is the idea of the domain. They have different models, or they can call it packages, modules, or whatever components, but they sort of responsible for a particular part. You have typically some kind of designer that helps you to design the reports. You have a sort of server that runs everything. Like you have a report to generate, it will be done by the server, and you have some additional features like integration with mobile devices and so forth, so on and so forth. Then you have a Jasper. You have the same. I think the Jasper is also popular due to its reports. And nowadays, if you look at this one, at the third one, they have Jasper ETL, powered by Talend. I think it has a name since long, actually. It had a new name, Talend Studio. So it's sort of the software used for ETL processes. It's also widespread, and they are also use some. They are also sort of innovative and using a web-based approach for reporting, using Visualize, and so on and so forth. And it's baked by TIBCO. And if you remember, I don't think that you really remember because it's really hard to spot. TIBCO used to be one of the companies that was almost always mentioned by the Gartner group. So they're really a huge player, and they're baking this Jasper software. So it looks like this. So it's also, if you know the Eclipse, it's also Eclipse based, but has some nice features such as Visualize, JS, and then ETL tool. I think you don't have any questions till now because it was overview of the tools and some arguments why one should use them. Then the last one that is listed here is Pentaho. Pentaho features are data access and ETL. It used to be called Kettle. Nowadays it's called Pentaho Data Integration, PDI. It got its own reporting. It's got its own OLAP server. It's got its own dashboard and visualization sort of platform. And lately, 2 years ago, I think, they announced the big data capability in the sense of they have sort of shims, I think it's called in Pentaho, so you can install particular plugin and you can integrate your BI solution with, for instance, Hadoop or with Spark. There are also some related projects like embedded reporting, G3 reports. I think it's really outdated project. Then you have Mondrian, which is OLAP engine, and I think it's also not that used. Why? Because I think it's, first of all, it's heavy, and to be really OLAP, to use really OLAP as OLAP, so to have a multi-dimensional tables, you need to have resources on your server, and you need to know how to cook it. So that's why an open source solution for this case could be a real overkill. Why? Because, for instance, you're in OLAP, in sort of OLAP engine, you should be able to answer any query to your data cube. It means that you have to calculate all possible data variants, which leads to usage of the high usage of the space. And then they have a data mining through Weka. Weka is, by the way, a really nice tool that offers not, it's called here data mining, but you have also machine learning algorithms. They were one of the pioneers of the open source or of such tool, as you have a tool and you have everything there, starting from data ingestion, data wrangling, and ending up with model deployment and evaluation. I think the Weka is also famous. They're from New Zealand. They're also famous for offering the really good, they used to be really good machine learning tutorials and online materials, and think they are now launching something Weka 2.0 that is sort of more deep learning oriented version of the Weka. What I wanted to mention with respect to Pentaho, I mentioned it as a related project, but if you check the website of Pentaho Community Edition, sometimes those tools are sold as the components of the Pentaho, or one may think that they're components of the Pentaho, which is not the case. So it's like you have Pentaho, and here are also tools that you may want to use in order to address the whole spectrum of the BI needs. Nowadays, so you have Pentaho Business Analytics, which is basically an Tomcat var file deployed inside the Tomcat. You saw the screenshots when that Andreas showed you with the dashboard from Pentaho. This is like and Pentaho Business Analytics that used to be Pentaho BI or Pentaho BI server. And now you have also an Pentaho data integration, which is and used to be called Kettle, that one would like to use as an ETL tool. It's a nice tool. We use it in the course, but it's really heavy. So it's to run it, you need to have a lot of resources. But it's a desktop version, and if you compare desktop version of ETL and sort of web-based version of ETL, there are a lot of cases when the desktop version are winning. Why? Because you have a better integration with the host machine. You can like sort of cron-like jobs and all that stuff are better to be organized, and you have an sort of one machine to rule all the ETL. In case of web-based version ETL, you will see in the exercises, it's not trivial task. And I already mentioned to you integration with the big data via the components. And what I have to mention here, I think the old versions are not compatible with the new versions, are incompatible with the old versions. So starting from 8.1 or 9.1, you could potentially use big data components, but not with the previous versions, which is totally fine for the BI. I already spoke about it. It's a classical sort of BI process where you move the data from the left to the right, and you can sort of use the BI from the Pentaho PDI on different stages of the sort of nowadays classical process. So you have an ingestion, then you have a process, then you sort of publish, and the end you have a reporting, which is Pentaho Analytics. I hope it makes sense, more or less. So it's still, now we're sort of dive deeper into two parts of the BI, data integration, and sort of processing, and looked from the technical perspective. Now, I also wanted to mention you how the PDI look like. Why I wanted to mention it to you, because you see on the right top slide some some funny icons with the connections, some numbers, and some statuses there. And this is like sort of a classical way how one would like to design an ETL process or any kind of process. In this case, ETL process makes more sense because we are in the BI. What those icons mean. For instance, there is an icon called split fields, which is obviously what is done here. It splits the input into filtered rows and memory group by, and something will be written to the logs and something will be written to Kafka Producer. And I spoke before about the integration with the big data. And this is how it's done. You have sort of an additional icon at the end that you configure and that is able to speak to some big data component, sort of such as Kafka, for instance. Apache Kafka, it's a data ingestion tool, or publish, subscribe, or you name it what. So I saw really different ways of Kafka usage till now. It's really amazing how you can use it with the streams, with the topics, with the subscription, when you move huge amounts of data with an enterprise service bus. So you can really use it in a lot of use cases when you have really a lot of data. I hope it makes to some extent sense, yeah, to you. Now I'll move to a summary. As you may understood, most interesting part of the open source solution tools is their ETL tool. So PDI, Pentaho, Data Integration, Talent, and other components. So why? Because for instance, in case of Pentaho, you will open the documentation, you will read, you will see, okay, this is a nice report, let me create it. And when you try to create it in the open source, you will notice that you are not able to use most of the features of this nice report from the documentation. Why? Because it's not a part of the community edition. It's a specific example of the Pentaho. So open source tools are not always up to date and may not contain offer features that you may want. For instance, web interface for self-service BI. Or integration with the big data component. I mentioned to you Pentaho had this integration. I'm speaking about the Pentaho because I know the tool the best. The Pentaho had the integration since 3 years, and the Hadoop hype was almost over sort of 2 years ago. So it's like the commercial editions, most of them had already the integration with the state of the art for big data crunching Hadoop, and the Pentaho are not able to integrate itself with the Hadoop. And now it is, but still you lost a bit the time. Of course, there is always workarounds for sure, definitely. But workarounds means more time, more budget, and so on and so forth. Documentation is not always up to date. To rephrase it, I hate Pentaho. This is like, if you will search for something from Pentaho to be done, you will find some stuff that is outdated, like I don't know what, like 10 years old, and it's really hard to get through the documents in order to really understand how to apply some particular things. That's why some tools are more popular. For instance, if you need something simple and you don't want to, and you are fine with not using an open source, you can like use something like a Power BI from Microsoft, which is really, really amazing tool. It could be really hard to deploy. For instance, legacy deployment process, no Docker support, and it's a source heavy hosting. That's why you don't, despite the Pentaho Analytical Server, it's a web-based server. You're not getting it in, as part of this course, because it's to scale it for the all students that we have. It will be impossible because it's really resource intensive. It's if you to run a single instance costs a lot of resources, hardware resources, and it could be not an easy to deploy because there's not always a Docker support. It's not like Docker pull, Docker run. You have to like get through the old configurations of Tomcat, Apache Tomcat, in order to get it up and running. And most interesting features are not part of the community edition. I already mentioned a couple of times. It requires a significant customization on the all levels. So it means also that customization in this case also means the integration as well. So why Microsoft? It's let's put it like amazing software developer company, because all of their tools are integrated together and they will work, you won't believe it, but they really work more or less smoothly together. It's a different which tool you will take. It's really already integrated, which saves a lot of time. And in case of open source BI, and in case of, for instance, you want to use some advanced analytics and Pentaho, you have Veka, and you have to do the integration on your own. It's totally fine, but you must be aware of this particular problem. And it's slowly replaced. So I spoke about those classical BI solutions. They are slowly replaced step by step by the tools from the big data and machine learning communities. For instance, some tasks you can already do with another tool called Apache NiFi, which is actually also heavy and not easy to run. But if it's running, if you configure it properly, it will run. And you have a graphical interface. You have what is also really important for Apache NiFi or for a tool. You have a lot of connectors. You can post. I think Apache NiFi you can connect to almost any database, any endpoint. It could be a tricky, but you will do it. Then there is an also almost state of the art for the designing data pipelines. It's a new term, or maybe you have heard it, but it's sort of, if you will think from the philosophical point of view, data pipeline, it's ETL on steroids. So it's a bit more sophisticated and more open source tool driven tool for the set of tools for data engineers who like Git, who like Google, who like command line Linux, and all around it, who don't like that much the graphical user interfaces. And in comparison to ETL tools that are desktop-based solutions that are heavy and not always transparent, and could be also hard to manage. And Apache Hadoop, I already mentioned it to you. If you never heard about the tool, I think you heard. So it's distributed data processing and data storage system. Distributed is really important, that uses a commodity hardware. Commodity hardware means all your laptops could be connected into a single cluster, Hadoop cluster, and it will just process the terabytes of the data easily. Easily means not in a second. Easily means you will be able to process terabytes of the data. This is what means easily in this case. We used to also, we did a project groups with the Hadoop. We also used to teach or look at the Hadoop in BI too, but nowadays it's not more, it's mostly got replaced by Apache Spark, because Apache Spark is a bit lighter, got a better interface, and it works as the sponge that absorbs the data, able to process the data, got integrated machine learning and data processing inside it, streaming as well, and integration with different databases and connectors. And it's also got support for different languages like Python, for instance, which is loved by some people called data engineers. Yeah, I hope you understood something from my speech today. So, like, we start with the open source and end up with the interesting part of the open source ETL tools. And I also mentioned to you data pipelines, which you will face nowadays really often. For instance, there are 1.5 years ago, or no, 2 years ago, I think, one of the unicorns of the Silicon Valley called Fivetran. If you check them, Fivetran, I think they have a really huge investments for 2 years. They are basically constructing and helping data to create data pipelines, and not only data pipelines, they're helping people to migrate to cloud, which is really back then. I don't know now, maybe now it's also I think now it's also interesting topic. Like, imagine that you have a lot of data, you want to use cloud, but you're afraid that not only you solved, let's assume that you solved the issues with data privacy, with the trust and all that stuff. It's not more the point. Now you have simply the technical issues. How to move the data smoothly to the cloud without interrupting your services, and switch when you are done with the data. Yeah, how to switch to the services within the cloud. This is like what Fivetran is like doing. If you look into details of the software, they basically writing connectors for all possible databases in cloud and on demand to achieve those goals. Okay, we're almost done for today. I thought that I will manage to speak about the ETL tools. I hope that you can still hear me. I think I won't be managed because if I will take the next 15 minutes, I won't be done with this part. That's why I will just do both parts next week, ETL and visualization tools. Yeah, but before I will announce the completeness of the lecture, I would like to ask a single question. I will do it in my classical way. I'll just start a poll. I hope you're ready. You can just a second. Yeah, start poll. So the question is, what is good? Why it is a good idea to start with an open source BI tools? Just a second. Just a second. Can you see? Okay. Because I was struggling with the pulling, with the starting the poll. Do you really see the D option? Yeah, most of you, I think that most of you listen to me, or the question is naive. So first of all, the answer B, why it's not correct. Open source BI tools are totally free and anyone can use them. I explicitly told you multiple times they are free, but they're not totally free. So you still have to think about the investments and the budgets and the time and so on and so forth. Then C, open source tools are always up to date and full featured. I think this example I mentioned also more than 10 or 20 times with Mentaho that is not up to date and they're like not able to execute that fast, which is totally fine for the open source. And the cost to market is significantly lower in comparison to enterprise tools, which is the correct answer. You remember the slide with the two curves where you start to like with the less investments, you can already deploy something useful. Yeah, most of you get the answer right. So I think the ones who clicked A and D just clicked the wrong button. So I'm done for today. Now you have a possibility to ask questions if you have any. And I hope you enjoyed the lecture. And I will see you, hear you on Friday on the exercise. And I hope it will work with the Metabase as the tool for the visualization. And we're going to have sort of introductory exercise to the visualization. Do we have questions? I hope you are still hearing me.